Dethatching has a strange reputation in lawn care, since it is genuinely one of the most useful things you can do for a struggling lawn, and also one of the easiest ways to seriously damage a healthy one, depending entirely on how and when you actually go about it. Done right, on a lawn that genuinely needs it, at the right point in the season, dethatching opens the door for water, air, and nutrients to reach the roots again, and can leave a lawn noticeably thicker within a matter of weeks. Done wrong, it tears up healthy turf that never needed the treatment in the first place, right when the plant has the least energy to recover from that kind of stress. There are 7 specific mistakes that account for almost every dethatching disaster homeowners run into, and knowing them before you rent the machine or grab the rake saves you from turning a helpful maintenance task into a season-long recovery project. None of these 7 require special expertise to avoid. They mostly just require slowing down for a few minutes to check something before committing to a full afternoon of raking, or a rented machine you are already paying for by the hour. Quick note before we get into the list, since this is exactly the kind of thing people ask me about constantly. If you are tired of guessing whether a lawn task actually needs doing or is about to backfire, I wrote a short ebook that walks you through your specific grass type, month by month, so you always know exactly what to do and when. Scan the QR code on screen, or check the link in the description if you want a copy. Now, let's get into the mistakes. Before covering the mistakes, it helps to know exactly what you are dealing with, since a lot of the confusion around dethatching starts with a fuzzy understanding of what thatch even is. Thatch is a layer of living and dead organic material, mainly grass stems, roots, and crowns, that builds up between the soil surface and the green grass blades above it. A thin layer, generally anything under about ½ an inch, is actually beneficial rather than harmful, since it helps insulate the crown from temperature swings, holds a bit of moisture in the soil, and provides some cushioning against foot traffic. Problems start once that layer grows past roughly ½ an inch to ¾ of an inch, since at that thickness it begins blocking water, air, and nutrients from actually reaching the soil and the roots underneath, forcing roots to grow up into the thatch layer itself instead of down into real soil, which leaves the whole plant more vulnerable to drought and heat stress. Understanding that threshold is the foundation for avoiding the very first mistake on this list. It is worth knowing what actually drives thatch buildup in the first place too, since a lawn does not build up excess thatch just from existing. Overwatering, heavy nitrogen fertilizing, and grass varieties that spread aggressively through above-ground runners, like Kentucky bluegrass, Bermuda, and zoysia, all accelerate how fast that layer accumulates, since all 3 encourage rapid new growth without necessarily speeding up how quickly the older material underneath actually breaks down. A lawn that gets dethatched once without addressing whichever of these habits caused the buildup in the first place often finds itself right back in the same situation within a couple of years, which is worth keeping in mind heading into the rest of this list. The single most common mistake is dethatching a lawn based on assumption rather than measurement, often because the grass looks a little rough, or a neighbor mentioned doing theirs, without ever actually checking whether a real thatch problem exists. Since a thin layer of thatch is genuinely helpful, tearing into a lawn that sits comfortably under that ½ inch threshold does nothing but stress healthy turf for no real benefit. The fix is a simple physical check rather than a guess. Cut a small wedge out of the lawn with a spade or a trowel, going down a couple of inches, and look at the brownish, spongy layer sitting between the green grass blades and the soil. Measure it with a ruler, checking in a few different spots around the yard, rather than just one, since thatch can build up unevenly depending on sun exposure, soil type, and how that particular section has been mowed and watered over the years. If that measurement consistently comes in under ½ an inch, the lawn does not need dethatching at all right now, and the better use of your time is addressing whatever is actually causing the rough appearance instead. A quicker, rougher check you can do without any tools at all is simply pressing a finger straight down into the lawn after watering. If it sinks in and reaches soil fairly easily, thatch is probably still within a normal, healthy range. If it feels spongy and bounces back without reaching soil, that is a decent early sign of buildup worth confirming with the actual wedge and ruler method before committing to a full dethatching session. Skipping straight to dethatching without either check tends to happen most often right after a lawn had a rough summer, since a stressed, thin-looking lawn gets blamed on thatch by default, even when the real cause was drought stress, mowing height, or a pest problem that had nothing to do with the thatch layer at all. Running the wedge test first, even when you feel fairly confident thatch is the issue, costs you 5 minutes and protects an otherwise healthy lawn from an unnecessary stressor during a season when it can least afford one. A huge number of homeowners avoid leaving grass clippings on the lawn specifically because they believe the clippings are building up into thatch, when the two things are almost entirely unrelated. University extension research has been clear on this point for years. Fresh grass clippings are roughly 90% water and break down within about a week or two in a healthy, actively decomposing lawn, contributing very little to the thatch layer at all. Actual thatch is built from tougher, more fibrous plant material, mainly stems, crowns, and roots, which resist breaking down far longer than a soft, water-heavy grass clipping ever does. Mistaking one for the other leads to two bad outcomes at once. Homeowners bag and throw away clippings that were actually feeding the lawn for free, while still ending up with a genuine thatch problem building up from the actual source, meaning stems and roots decomposing slower than the lawn is producing them, usually driven by overwatering, heavy nitrogen fertilizing, or grass varieties that spread aggressively through above-ground runners. Correctly identifying that clippings are not the enemy here matters because it stops you from making an unnecessary sacrifice while the real cause of any thatch buildup continues completely unaddressed. There is a real cost to that mistaken belief too, beyond just the wasted effort of bagging. Fresh clippings left on the lawn return a meaningful share of the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium the grass just used to grow, effectively giving you a portion of a fertilizer application for free every single time you mow. So bagging out of a mistaken fear of thatch means paying for fertilizer to replace nutrients you were throwing away in the first place. Getting this kind of basic diagnosis right before reaching for a power rake is exactly the sort of practical detail the ebook I put together walks you through. The QR code is on screen now, or grab the link in the description if you want to check it out. Timing matters just as much as whether the lawn needs dethatching in the first place, since this process is genuinely stressful on the plant, no matter how carefully it is done, and recovery depends entirely on the grass being in active growth mode when the stress hits. For cool season grasses like fescue, bluegrass, and ryegrass, the ideal window sits in late summer through early fall, generally late August through September in most of the country, when the heat of summer has broken and the grass is entering its strongest growth period of the year, with plenty of time left to recover before winter. Spring is a workable secondary option for cool season grass but carries more risk since it overlaps with crabgrass germination and can open up bare soil right when that weed is most ready to move in, meaning a spring dethatching session often needs to be paired with a pre-emergent herbicide application to avoid trading a thatch problem for a crabgrass problem a few weeks later. For warm season grasses like Bermuda, Zoysia, and St. Augustine, the timing flips, with late spring through early summer being ideal, specifically after the lawn has fully greened up and is actively growing, rather than still waking up from winter dormancy. Dethatching outside these windows, even on a lawn that genuinely needs it, sets the plant up to sit in a damaged, thinned-out state for months rather than bouncing back quickly. Exactly where those windows fall shifts a bit depending on your specific climate too, since late August in a northern state with an early fall can look quite different from late August somewhere still holding on to summer heat well into October. The more reliable marker than a fixed calendar date is watching the grass itself, waiting for daytime temperatures to consistently ease off the peak summer highs and for the lawn to show clear signs of renewed active growth, like a faster mowing interval, before scheduling the work. Even within the right general season, picking a bad week can undo a lot of the benefit. Dethatching during a stretch of extreme heat or drought asks an already stressed plant to recover from mechanical damage on top of whatever environmental stress it is already dealing with, and a lawn in that condition often does not have the spare energy reserves to do both at once. The visible result is frequently large dead patches, where the dethatching itself, rather than the heat alone, ends up being the tipping point that kills sections of grass that might have otherwise limped through the hot stretch intact. The fix here is simple, checking the extended forecast before committing to a date, rather than just picking a weekend based on when you happen to be free. Aim for a stretch with mild temperatures and no drought conditions in play, and if rain has been scarce, giving the lawn a deep watering a day or two beforehand helps the soil and the grass handle the process with less overall shock. Recovery time is the other piece worth planning around. A lawn dethatched under good conditions, mild weather, and consistent moisture typically shows visible new growth filling back in within 2 to 3 weeks. The same treatment carried out during a heat wave can take considerably longer to show any recovery at all, and in the worst cases, sections that were struggling before the dethatching even started never fully bounce back before the next stressful season arrives, turning a routine maintenance task into a much longer-term problem. Skipping proper prep before dethatching is a mistake that shows up constantly, and mowing height is the biggest piece of that prep most people skip. Going into a dethatching session with grass left at its normal mowing height makes it much harder for a rake or a power dethatcher to actually reach down into the thatch layer where it needs to work, since the blades themselves get in the way of the tines doing their job. The fix is mowing the lawn down to roughly half its usual height, or somewhere around 2 inches for most grass types, right before you start dethatching. This gives the equipment direct access to the thatch layer sitting closer to the soil surface, making the whole process noticeably more effective in a single pass rather than needing several aggressive passes to compensate for tall grass getting in the way, which itself adds unnecessary extra stress to the lawn. Bag the clippings from this particular mow rather than leaving them, since you are about to be adding a large volume of pulled up thatch debris to the yard anyway, and there is no need to add a fresh layer of clippings into that same mix right before raking everything up. Once the dethatching itself is finished, you can go right back to your normal practice of leaving clippings down for future mows. Not every lawn with a legitimate thatch problem needs the same level of intervention, and grabbing the most aggressive tool available regardless of severity is a common way to cause more damage than necessary. A simple leaf rake or a dedicated thatching rake, both worked by hand, are appropriate for light thatch buildup or for small areas, offering a controlled, gentler removal that a homeowner can easily judge and adjust as they go. A gas-powered power rake or vertical mower, the kind typically rented for a weekend, is a genuinely aggressive tool designed for moderate to heavy thatch, and running one of these over a lawn with only a mild thatch layer can tear up far more living turf than thatch, leaving a thin, scalped-looking lawn that takes much longer to recover than the original problem would have justified. Matching the tool to the actual measured thickness of the thatch, rather than defaulting to whichever tool is easiest to rent that weekend, keeps the treatment proportional to the actual problem. As a rough guide, a thatch layer sitting right around the half-inch threshold is generally well suited to a manual thatching rake, worked in overlapping passes across the affected area. Once thatch pushes past 3/4 of an inch, a power rake or vertical mower becomes genuinely appropriate, since manually raking a layer that thick would take an enormous amount of time and effort to accomplish what the machine handles in a fraction of the time. Rental shops can usually help set the depth on a power dethatcher correctly for your situation, and starting at a shallower setting than you think you need, checking the results, and going slightly deeper on a second pass if necessary is a safer approach than setting it aggressively deep on the first pass and risking scalping healthy turf down to bare soil. Knowing exactly which tool your specific situation calls for, instead of guessing and hoping for the best, is precisely the kind of decision the ebook I wrote walks you through for your grass type. The QR code is on screen now, or grab the link in the description if you want a copy. Dethatching does not end the moment the raking or the power rake pass is finished, and treating it like a one-step task is one of the more damaging mistakes on this list, because it leaves a freshly stressed lawn without the support it needs to actually recover. The debris pulled up during dethatching needs to be raked up and removed from the lawn rather than left sitting on top of the grass, since a thick layer of loose thatch debris left in place can smother the very turf you were trying to help. After cleanup, the lawn benefits from a deep watering to help stressed roots recover, along with a light fertilizer application appropriate for the season to support new growth, though it is worth noting fertilizing right before dethatching is generally discouraged, since it can add unnecessary stress right as the mechanical damage happens, making after the process the better timing for that step. If the dethatching opened up bare patches, this is also the ideal moment to overseed, since the freshly exposed soil gives grass seed far better contact than it would get pushing through an intact layer of turf and thatch. Spread seed shortly after cleanup while the soil is still loosened and exposed. Keep the area consistently moist through germination rather than letting it dry out between waterings, and hold off on mowing the new grass until it has reached a height where it can tolerate the cut without being pulled straight out of the still loose soil. Skipping this follow-up seeding step on a lawn that came out of dethatching noticeably thinner is a missed opportunity, since that freshly prepared soil will not stay this receptive to new seed for long before surrounding grass and weeds move back in to fill the open space on their own. A closely related mistake worth addressing on its own is reaching for dethatching when the actual underlying problem is soil compaction rather than excess thatch, since the two issues look similar on the surface but need different solutions. If your lawn feels spongy or bouncy underfoot, and a wedge test confirms a thatch layer over the half-inch threshold, dethatching is the right call. If instead the soil itself feels hard and compacted, water tends to run off rather than soak in, and there is heavy foot or vehicle traffic across certain areas, core aeration, which pulls small plugs of soil out of the ground rather than removing organic matter from the surface, is generally the better fix, since it addresses compacted soil directly while causing less overall disruption to the turf than dethatching does. In cases where a lawn has both a genuine thatch problem over 3/4 of an inch and compacted soil at the same time, extension guidance generally recommends dethatching first, then aerating a couple of weeks later once the lawn shows signs of recovering from the first treatment, rather than running both stressful processes back to back in the same week. Most healthy lawns do not need either treatment on an annual basis. Kentucky bluegrass and fescue lawns typically only need dethatching somewhere every 2 to 3 years, while faster spreading grasses like Bermuda and Zoysia can build up thatch quickly enough to justify checking every single year, even if the actual treatment itself is not always needed that often once the underlying causes, like overwatering or heavy nitrogen use, are brought under control. So to recap the full list, do not dethatch a lawn without measuring the actual thatch layer first. Do not confuse harmless grass clippings with the real cause of thatch buildup. Do not dethatch outside the active growth window for your specific grass type. Do not run the process during heat or drought stress. Do not skip mowing the lawn short beforehand. Do not reach for an aggressive power rake when a light hand rake would do the job. And do not walk away the moment the raking is done without following through on cleanup, watering, and overseeding. Handle those 7 things correctly, and dethatching becomes exactly what it is supposed to be: a genuinely useful tool that leaves a struggling lawn noticeably thicker and healthier within a few weeks, rather than a mistake that sets the whole yard back for the rest of the season. If you want the complete month-by-month plan for your specific lawn, covering exactly what to do and when so you are never just guessing, the ebook I wrote is linked in the description below, or scan the QR code on screen to grab it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.